Hi, my name is Sabrina Porter, and I am presenting this PowerPoint presentation on the movie The Wedding Date. This movie was released in the USA on February 4th, 2005. It's considered to be a comedy romance, and it's PG-13, so there's not much violence or nudity or strong language. There's some, but not much. And it's an hour and 30 minutes running time. So the plot of this movie is there is a young lady named Kat. Sorry, my table's squeaking. There's a young lady named Kat who is going to be returning home to England for her sister's wedding. And she's single, and she doesn't want to go back home after 2 years appearing still to be single. So she hires an escort to accompany her to England so that she can convince everyone that she is indeed in a relationship and happy and life is all good. She's also doing this to pretend to be happy to make her ex-fiance, who is going to be in the wedding, she wants to make him jealous. So little does, there's a little twist, of course. So little does Kat know that she may find love after all, even in a male escort. So that's a little bit of the plot. Just some few fun movie facts that I found were artificial flowers had to be used as much as possible because Deborah Messing is allergic to real flowers. And the movie was going to be called something borrowed, but they decided on The Wedding Date. And the scene, I thought this was interesting. The scene in which they're at the picnic in the movie, it was actually filmed at the Winkworth Arboretum in England. And besides the first few scenes of the movie in New York City, the film was shot in London, England. I chose this particular scene to discuss listening. And in this scene, Nick is the messenger, obviously. He's relaying a message to Kat, so she's the receiver in this instance. The channel of communication is that Nick is verbally speaking to her. And environmental noise is all around them. There's cars flying by, honks of the cars. I'm sorry, the horns are honking from the cars. And one thing that I noticed in this scene, though, is that Kat, she's very in tune to what Nick is saying. She's got her eyes closed per his instruction. She's focusing on what he is saying. She's being attentive. She is giving him all her attention. Even though there's all this noise that's going on around them, she is still focusing on what he is speaking. So, I mean, of course, it's give and take. He's talking to her. She's listening. In the channel of communication, I think I mentioned is, that Nick is speaking to her. There's also a lot of nonverbal communication going on here too. The way that he's leaning into her, she's pretty comfortable with him leaning into her, and they're very close proximity. So I chose, again, this scene to kind of go over some of the listening and types of noise that could contribute, and just some types of communication. Okay, and again, touching base on listening, this scene in particular is when Kat is attending her sister Amy's bachelorette party, and some of the barriers, I guess, that I wanted to show of listening is that for effective listening, in the previous scene, like I said, the cars were all around them and the noise of the city, and some distractions, in this particular scene is that the women were distracted. They were sizing Nick up. He was, very good looking, so they were evaluating him. Nick's entering what they call the hen house, and all of a sudden all the women turn and just all eyes are focused on him as he's bringing Kat her purse. again, another barrier was the women were all intoxicated. The music was playing very loudly. As I just said, Nick and his good looks were distracting. So those were producing all kinds of barriers for listening to be effective. I know I wrote in my paper, some of the things that could have took place were if they would have stepped outside to where it was a little bit quieter, or to a quieter booth in the back of the room, so that they could focus on each other and actually hear each other. And I know that there was smoking. I had mentioned in my paper there was smoking that was taking place. And for me, it'd be a huge distraction because I don't like smoke. And I would be focusing on how smelly it was and that it was burning my eyes, and I wouldn't be able to focus and listen. Alrighty, so moving on to verbal and nonverbal messages. I can start with some nonverbal messages right away. So in this scene, previously to this dancing scene, Kat is very intoxicated. She's taking out cash from ATM machines to get money together so that she can pay for intimacy with Nick. So this kind of creates a little bit of stress between them two. Nick is visibly upset by this. So this is a nonverbal again. You can see it on his face. He's wearing not a sad face and not an angry face, but he's disturbed by it because he likes Kat, and for her to get money, which is also a nonverbal message, she's laying money on the table. He was upset by this because he likes her. They're very stiff with each other when they get into the dance studio. They, are looking each other in the eyes, and they're both kind of daring each other, and they have rigid posture, and their eyes are locked with looks of defiance. They are challenging each other. All of these verbal messages are taking place between them. Okay, and to continue on with the verbal and nonverbal messages, some verbal messages where I didn't really touch base on this, but one thing that Kat had asked Nick was, "What's the matter, Nick? Do you have two left feet?" So she was communicating some messages verbally, and Nick then demonstrates to her that he is quite a dancer by tripping her, and in her face she has this look of shock, and he catches her and just starts spinning her around the floor. And as I point out here, their body posture definitely was revealing that they were not too excited to have to dance with each other. They were both, as I said previously, being very defensive and guarded. But towards the end, because they were being so fierce with each other, they start laughing, and they kind of, you can see them relax, and Nick starts twirling her quickly around, and they both just start smiling and giggling. And at this point, the nonverbal message that is displayed as they move closer together, their bodies move closer together, and they are more fluid in their motions rather than being so stiff. In this scene, Nick is, being seen being very supportive in quite a few scenes throughout this movie. But in this instance, Amy and Jeffrey are having a heated discussion, a heated argument, and Nick walks in on this, and he senses, that something is not right, and Jeffrey quickly walks away, and he extends or actually he puts his hand on Amy's shoulder and asks her if she's okay, and he's trying to be supportive of her because he can tell there was a tense situation that was taking place. And Amy starts to, relate and talk with him and tell him that she hopes that the walls don't remember everything. And then later in the scene, it's revealed to Kat. Jeffrey then chases after Kat when she's going down to the cellar to get wine, and he kind of corners her and wants to talk to her, and he reveals to her at that point at the rehearsal dinner that he was having an affair with her sister, and that's what ended their engagement. Um, this is crushing to Kate. I mean, it's devastating. So she, runs out of the cellar, and Nick is there. He knows kind of what's taking place. Nick and TJ, which you see in the picture here, she can tell by the look on Kat's face that she was just told devastating news, and the kind of relationship that Nick and Kat are developing is an exclusive one, that couples would share. And he, of course, goes right to Kat and is offering his support. He takes her hand, he kisses her hand, and he embraces her with a hug. And these are all parts of interpersonal relationships, of him being supportive and holding her. And even though he's developed a friendship with Amy, Kat's sister, he's developing more of an intimate relationship with Kat. He's really starting to trust her. She's starting to trust him. She's leaning on him, in these moments of when she's really sad. And so they're starting to develop this brand new relationship, in a sense, even though she is trying to let go of a past relationship also. Alrighty, and some of the interpersonal conflicts, that took place between their relationships were that, Kat was betrayed, not only from her sister, but from her fiance. And that, of course, inserts a huge distrust and amount of, a feeling of being, well, actually, she was betrayed. So, I mean, betrayal is a big conflict there. And actually neglect too, I guess. I mean, because Jeffrey, who was at one time Kat's fiance, failed to keep nurturing the relationship. So there was, some neglect, conflict going on. I mean, there was a disagreement, with Kat and her sister. She was very upset with her, and even though she was upset, she sacrificed that so that her sister's wedding could continue. And she knew at that time, Kat knew at that time, that it was better to just postpone that argument with her sister rather than, engaging in the argument. She just decided to postpone it, and that way that Amy could have her wedding, and then they would just discuss it at a later time. And those were some of the conflicts that I had noticed. Alright, and talking about conflict management, Amy came clean the day of the wedding. She told Edward of her relationship with Kat's ex-fiance, which is also Jeffrey's best friend. So Edward and Jeffrey were best friends. And Amy just decided to lay it all on the table. And Edward, initially he handles the conflict. He reacts out of anger and maybe somewhat avoidance, because he doesn't choose to really talk with Amy any further about, what she's put out there. But he goes in search of Jeffrey, because he wants to, cause physical harm. He's quite angry, and he wants to solve that conflict, with his fists. Edward, and later on, Edward realizes he's capable of, sacrificing his feelings of being hurt, so putting, I guess, compromising in that sense, because he wants, to continue to marry Amy. Alrighty, so interpersonal power and influence. So again, Amy and Edward both understood there was a conflict. They were trying to examine the possible solutions. As I said in the previous slide, Edward in the beginning avoided everything and just looked to settle it with, being physical with Jeffrey. But she apologizes for what took place, and oddly, he accepts. So they reached a solution. They were both able to move forward and have their wedding. So in this sense of communicating, they were both able to collaborate a solution, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, they had recognized that they had a goal, and that was, to be together and to get married. And so that is what they did. They formed a solution and went ahead and got married. Okay, so my personal evaluation is that I'm trying not to talk too long because I am at 15 minutes and 25 seconds. I didn't realize I was so long-winded. There's so much more to communicating than just talking. I mean, what I just stated here. I didn't realize how many other avenues of communication there was. And I mean, of course, I think of nonverbal and verbal communication, but it just goes beyond that. You got to pay attention to people's body postures and their eye contact and what their face says. So I guess, for me, the class has taught me, as I stated here, to be a better listener, be more observant, I guess, when people are speaking. And especially that, for me, it's taught me about paying attention to when I'm speaking to other people, as far as like my tone and my body language, because something that I may have said to someone, they may think that I said it harshly when I really wasn't meaning to. So I guess, the class has taught me to pay attention, to those kind of things. And one other thing I wanted to note is that, conflict is not my favorite. So I learned a little bit about, myself and how I handle conflict. And a lot of times it probably is avoidance. And other times I just give in, rather than fight about it. I guess I would sacrifice my feelings of, what I really feel about the situation than to rather argue about it. So I guess I learned that about myself. And there's a big wide world of communication. I just didn't realize how many different avenues there were to it. So, but I enjoyed the class, and thank you very much.